John had only one goal: to uncover the cause of his mother's death. The only way to do this was to dig up her grave. What he discovered when he lifted the coffin's lid plunged him into terror. John was in a dark mood that fateful night and could barely think clearly. He knocked rapidly and repeatedly on the funeral home's door and, without waiting for an answer, opened it. Along with him, he had brought a spade. He entered the office and saw an elderly man sitting calmly. It was old Thomas, the man who worked at the funeral home and served as the cemetery's caretaker. John demanded that he leave the office and lead him to his mother's grave. His mother, Monica, had been buried only 2 days ago in the cemetery, and now John wanted him to show him the way. After providing his mother's full name, old Thomas agreed. He closed the office, and together, they headed to the nearby cemetery. Thomas remembered easily where the grave was because he had personally overseen the burial. He had even helped carry the coffin. When they reached the grave, John wiped the tears from his eyes, gripped the spade, and began to dig. However, Thomas immediately stopped him, reminding him that exhuming a body without the proper permission was illegal. He demanded to know why John was so intent on desecrating the grave of his mother, who had only been buried for 2 days. John paid him no heed and continued digging. Before long, Thomas realized that he couldn't stop him. John was younger and stronger. The only way to prevent this was to call the police. He rushed to his phone, dialed, and reported the situation. Despite this, John kept digging, lost in his memories of the recent days. His thoughts were blurred. John had been away at college, far from home, when he was forced to drop everything, his studies, even his exams, after receiving the devastating news of his mother's death. It was only a few hours earlier that his father had called him, delivering the tragic news. However, 2 days had already passed since the funeral. John was furious that his father had kept the information from him, leaving him unable to say a final goodbye to his beloved mother. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't stop digging until his spade hit something hard: the coffin. He tossed the spade aside and prepared to open the lid. Suddenly, the air filled with the wailing sound of sirens as the police arrived. Before he could do anything further, they restrained him and placed handcuffs on his wrists. Thomas stood behind them, phone still in hand, but his expression was apologetic. He felt he had no choice but to report the situation, as exhuming a body without authorization was a serious offense. Though he pitied John, who was clearly distressed over his mother's death, he had to act. The police began questioning John, demanding an explanation for why he had felt the need to desecrate his mother's grave. John fell to his knees, overcome with tears. He admitted that he found it impossible to believe that his mother had died from a fatal heart attack. She had shown no signs of such an ailment. Monica had been a healthy and joyful woman who never let life's challenges weigh her down. This made her sudden death seem suspicious to him. She had been buried within a day of her passing, and these events convinced John that something was amiss. He couldn't let it go. He wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. Though the police understood his grief, they couldn't allow him to desecrate the grave. If John suspected foul play, he was advised to report it so proper steps could be taken. Desperate, John begged them to at least let him open the coffin and see his mother one last time. His words moved the officers, but they hesitated. They didn't want to break the law. However, since the grave had already been partly dug up, the only step left was to lift the coffin's lid. John decided to persist. If he kept pleading, perhaps he could convince them. Finally, luck seemed to favor him. The officers agreed to let him take one last look at his mother. Trembling, he climbed into the grave, approached the coffin, and carefully lifted the lid. With a heavy heart, he gazed upon his mother's face. She looked so serene, even in death, that it shattered his heart further. Overcome with emotion, he clasped her hand tightly. Then, to his shock, he felt a squeeze in return. Monica moved. Her eyes fluttered open, and her dry lips parted slightly as she drew in a shallow breath. The officers were stunned, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Neither could John. He couldn't trust his own eyes. Acting quickly, the police called for an ambulance. Monica was rushed to the hospital, where a medical team awaited her in the emergency ward. Meanwhile, John was taken to the police station to give a statement. He was bewildered, unable to comprehend how his mother had been buried alive or how any doctor could have pronounced her dead. The situation was bizarre and beyond his understanding. However, the most important thing was that Monica was alive. The next morning, the doctor's report revealed startling findings. Monica had never suffered a heart attack. Instead, her body contained high levels of sedatives. If she hadn't been discovered that day, she would have truly died. This revelation turned the case on its head, making it clear that an attempted murder had taken place. Thanks to the toxicology report, investigators identified the exact sedatives used. Further investigation revealed where they had been purchased. Surveillance footage from a pharmacy showed John's father, Bob, buying the sedatives. A prescription detailed the dosage and administration method. These shocking discoveries solidified Bob as the primary suspect in Monica's attempted murder. It was further revealed that Bob had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Monica 2 months prior. This policy provided a motive: if Monica died, Bob would receive a significant payout. With this evidence, the police issued a warrant for Bob's arrest. He was apprehended that same evening, shopping at a supermarket, oblivious to the unfolding investigation. Surrounded by officers, he had no chance to escape. During hours of interrogation, Bob initially denied all accusations. But when he learned that Monica was alive and there was video evidence of him purchasing the sedatives, he broke down. Begging for mercy, he confessed. He claimed he had never intended to kill Monica. His mistress had become pregnant and was pressuring him for money, threatening to expose their affair. Bob admitted he loved his mistress more than his wife and had been manipulated into a desperate plan to poison Monica. His goal was to claim the insurance money and start a new life. Hearing his father's confession, John felt his world collapse. He couldn't believe his father had been willing to commit such a heinous act for money and an affair. Disgusted, he watched as Bob was led away in handcuffs. A few days later, Bob's mistress was also arrested while trying to flee the country. Both were sentenced to prison. Monica stayed in the hospital for several days, undergoing tests and regaining her strength. When she was discharged, John was there to greet her at the hospital doors. Monica, proud of her son for uncovering the truth, embraced him. Together, they returned home, ready to rebuild their lives. John resumed his studies, and Monica began living a happier life, free from her husband's deceitful and dangerous schemes. This story, dear readers, serves as a powerful reminder that wealth comes and goes. True happiness lies in the love and support of those around us. Let it inspire us to cherish our loved ones and prioritize genuine connections over material gain.